Hello, my name is Dr. Gerard Toal, and this is a lecture in my course Topics in Political Geography, which I'm teaching at Virginia Tech in the spring of 2017. This lecture deals with Russian geopolitical culture, and it provides a brief overview of a conceptual framework as to how to think about Russian geopolitical culture. The framework is inspired by critical geopolitics. Now, I have assigned a series of different readings to you for this particular module, as well as Charles Clover's book here. What I want to say on this is that you need to approach Clover's book with a critical attitude. His book is called The Rise of Russia's New Nationalism. And you need to think about the ways in which nationalism operates. So Russian nationalism is not the same as Eurasianism. Eurasianism is the subject of his book. He argues on page 17, looking at Russia's recent behavior through the lens of Eurasianism, the goal of protecting Russia's civilizational identity makes a lot of the current behavior snap into focus and gives a consistent explanation as to which battles the Kremlin has chosen to fight and which ones it has chosen not to, and how it has fought them. Never mind that the whole idea of a civilizational identity is tendacious at best and totally contrived at worst. The most important aspect of Eurasianism is not its merits, but the consensus that it appears to enjoy across the Russian elite. Well, let's step back a bit and first talk about nationalism and grasp that nationalism in and of itself is a force which is protean, and that means that it can be molded to very different ends. If we think of nationalism in the political arena, it can be authoritarian and support authoritarian regimes or not. In the economic regime, it can be a populist and underpin populist ideals or not. In the case of identity, it can underscore very narrow understandings, ethnic understandings or confessional understandings, religious, linguistic understandings of identity or not. It can have a broader understanding. And when it comes to the state and the particular vision of the state, it can have a vision of the state as imperial, as a state that carries a civilizational identity, that carries a messianic vision, has a mission to the world, has a particular raison d'etre to spread its particular values, its civilization. And that civilization is seen as worthwhile, if not better than other civilizations. In fact, there may be a civilizational mission to lift up lesser peoples, smaller peoples, peoples that are perceived as being endangered. That's an imperial vision, or it can have and can underpin a critique of that, a critique of the imperial state in the name of a more authentic nation, an organic nation, which is betrayed by an imperial state, which sends off soldiers to fight in foreign wars and die in foreign wars when the real people are being neglected. Nationalism is protean, and it's important to grasp that. So what we're looking at is one particular articulation of nationalism in an imperial idiom and in a civilizational lexicon, civilizational vocabulary. And even then, that doesn't tell us that much about it, or it doesn't give us enough precision. Now, I have provided lectures on critical geopolitics and critical theories of geopolitics. Here, let me simply note that what we're looking at here is mostly practical geopolitics and some formal geopolitics. We're looking at some thinkers who are intellectuals of geopolitics, and then we're also looking at people who are in the political arena, who are entrepreneurs and seeking to acquire power, to become part of the state, to become part of parliament, and so on and so forth. And they're pushing particular projects. So this is geopolitics as advice to the state, as state council, and it is geopolitics as a partisan, political, active agitation. Now, all geopolitical cultures rest on particular imaginations and visions of the state. That is particularly true of Russia, and there's a series of different ones. Coming from the Tsarist period, you have ideas of Holy Russia, and these are often in tension with each other, because the idea of Holy Russia, as I explained elsewhere, is associated with an organic Russia, which is not necessarily imperial and is not necessarily Tsarist. A good Tsar can represent and be attentive to Holy Russia, but Holy Russia is separate from the Tsar. And of course then a bad Tsar can represent an imperial vision of the state, which is alienating to Holy Russia. So you kind of can contrast that Gemeinschaft understanding to a Gesellschaft understanding of it as a state which is bureaucratic, which is alien, which is a set of institutions that are separate from, quote unquote, the real people. So we have Holy Russia. Third Rome. Third Rome is a messianic vision of the Russian state, which is associated with orthodoxy and the idea of the Russian state as being a vehicle for universal crusades of various types. Of course, did not simply end with the Tsarist period. This was something that also characterized the Soviet Union. We have idea of Mother Russia. We have idea of Rossiya as a in and of itself, and in the Russian language, as we pointed out, there's an understanding of, it doesn't come across very well in English where you say Russia, but that could be Rus or it could be Rossiya. And Rossiya, you need to grasp, is understood as the imperial state. It is the project of the center, of the Kremlin, rather than the project of, quote unquote, the authentic organic nation. In the 18th century, we had, of course, the introduction of the idea of nationality with the rise of the age of nationalism, and this idea of the people, which was translated into Russian as narod, or nationality, narodnost. Now, this was something that was to kind of provide a vehicle for popular sovereignty against kings and monarchs, but it was appropriated by the regime in the 19th century and became one of the underpinnings of Tsarist rule, when you had the particular slogan, orthodoxy, autocracy, and then nationality. And that was added on in order to try to legitimate the Tsarist state as representing the nation. But it really, what it represented was itself as an imperial structure, and its understanding of the nation was Rossian. So there wasn't, it engaged in Russification projects, not Russification projects. So Russification as in this broader understanding that we are, as an imperial system, going to take these lesser peoples, these peoples of different faiths, of different nationalities and ethnicities, and we're going to mold them into become part of our empire. Then in the Soviet period, of course, the idea of the people was displaced by the idea of the proletariat as the vanguard of the state, and you had the nationality policy, which was about socialism, promoting socialism as the content of the nation. You had other notions, long-standing notions of Russia as a besieged fortress, the need to establish socialism in one country. That, of course, was Stalin's particular policy. And then the idea of Soviet Russia also had this imperial messianic quality to it, which represents a continuity from the Tsarist particular period. That Soviet Russia was to be the kind of the linchpin, the glue of the Soviet Union. It was the state-bearing, the federal state-bearing nation. And it saw itself as its job is to lift up all of the others. That was the particular conceit that was dominant. Now, one of the understandings that drives Clover's book and other studies is that there's a look towards intellectuals as the fountainhead or supposed brains of the Putin regime. I think this is a mistake. I think that Dugin does not explain Putinism in any way. Dugin is certainly part of the ecosystem which has been created by, or at least conditioned by, Putinism. But in one sense, there is a Fountainhead fantasy going on here, which to an extent Clover's book participates in, and that he's looking for the ideologists of Eurasianism, and he feels that if he finds those, that therefore he's going to really understand Putinism. And I think that it's much more important to look at the practical discourse rather than looking at particular intellectual ideas that seem to have a hold over those that are in policy positions. There's very little discussion of the popular. I will simply note that it is a domain of research, but it's not one that we're spending much time on. Now, as you will see from my book, Near Abroad, I divide Russian geopolitical culture in the post-Soviet period into three different traditions. A liberalizing Western tradition, which has a vision of Russia as a state that should be modern, European, and liberal. And that was had hold over the state for a very brief period of time. And within that, there was a debate as to whether the model for Russia should be the United States or Germany, should it be Europe, and where should what should Russia be looking towards? And there are some who look towards the United States and others that look towards Germany. There's a second tradition which quickly asserted itself, which is the great power tradition, that Russia is a great power. And in the past, the debates within this tradition were between Slavophiles, those that saw Russia's great power coming from its ability to be a sort of civilizational rallying force for Slavs, particularly in the Balkans in the 18th and 19th century. But there's also a different tradition, a realist tradition, which is much more skeptical of these affective commitments to communities beyond Russia's borders that don't necessarily serve Russia's national security interests. So what it means for Russia to be a great power is in of itself an open question. The third tradition is very much revisionist, and what I mean by revisionist, it means it is interested in changing the existing international order and changing the borders of post-Soviet Russia. And that's an imperial vision of Russia. And there are various iterations of this. There's a sort of a red Soviet version, and then there's various fascist visions, and so on and so forth. Now, the ideology that we're looking at Eurasianism or Neo-Eurasianism is part of that, and it straddles great power Russia and imperial Russia. Now, one thing to keep in mind as we begin to get into this and look at Eurasianism in greater detail is you need to think about these ideas and the intellectuals as being a part of a larger intellectual ecosystem. Ideas are supported. Institutions, newspapers, journals, debating clubs, reports, websites, and so on and so forth. All of those are supported by various vested interests, by various forces. So it's important to distinguish or to identify some of these. So the military-industrial complex is one of these, and so it supports Zavtra, which is the newspaper of Alexander Prokhanov, which is generally has a very right-wing approach, but it also expresses certain red Soviet ideas, but it's usually quite hardline. You have the Rodina, which is a political party which has been supported by the military-industrial complex. Izborsky Club, Spiritual Heritage, and there's the 1991 Puts network, the people that were involved in that particular attempted coup against Gorbachev, failed coup, who actually were able to rebound and reconstitute themselves as a force within the military-industrial complex, representing various industries and various institutions that were powerful in the Soviet Union and that remain powerful in Russia. And they have a whole support network. Secondly, you have the Orthodox Church and those that are I've described as white Russian nostalgics, those that are nostalgic for the monarchy, for Russia and its past, and so this is the Russian Orthodox Church. It is political orthodoxy, which is the movement within the political system to seek to have political parties which advance sort of conservative, very conservative values agenda. You have oligarchs associated with that. Konstantin Malofeev is probably the best known. And then you have those that are rehabilitating the legacy of figures like Denikin and Ilyin, the Civil War general and the ideologist of white Russian nationalism. Often their particular ideas are quite anti-Semitic and racist, and but nevertheless they are ones that have currency within Russia. And then lastly you have the presidential administration itself, and this is a very, very powerful network. So you need to pay attention to the most valuable parts really of Clover's book, in my opinion, is his discussion of political technology and his discussion of the ways in which the Kremlin is at the center of a universe which has a series of different estates really dependent upon it. So there's a media estate, there are oligarchs in the economy, there are political parties, and the Duma itself, as well as various civil and uncivil society movements. I say uncivil because uncivil means certain criminal groups or certain fascist groups. As well as groups such as Nashi and others, youth organizations and the like, sports organizations, patriotic clubs, and so on and so forth. All of that is to say that there's Russia is an authoritarian state. The Kremlin is really central to it. The degree to which the Kremlin has complete control over these is, of course, the big question, and whether it can continue to hold that control while the economy declines and resources become scarce, is of course the major question that lots of analysts of the country are asking. Okay, so that's an overview, theoretical overview of Russian geopolitical culture. Hopefully there's some ideas in there which will allow you to make sense of the readings. Good luck with those readings, and the next lecture will address Eurasianism. Thank you.